This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com and the Big Change Program with Josh Lajani. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live an enjoyable and epic life. So 3 quick things. First of all, if you're going to be going up to Plantstock this coming weekend to the Esselstyn Farm up in Catskills, New York, say hello. I'll be there. A bunch of us will be. Adam Sudd, Tim Kaufman, Josh Lajani, a bunch of people who've been on the podcast and who I'm proud to call friends and mentors and teachers of mine. So come up, say hello, and maybe come on a run with us in the morning. Second thing, the self-sabotage report is still available because I haven't written another one for August. So we still got July's report. We're letting it ride. You can get it for another week or two because I'll be traveling. I'm not going to get a chance to do anything about that. You can get it at plantyourself.com/sabotage. That's all lowercase. And third thing, amazingly, I'm up to $370 per month on Patreon. I should say we are up to $370 per month on Patreon. I'm beginning to see how the podcast itself could eventually, at some point, become a thing that I don't have to subsidize with my own time and money. It's getting there. And the first stretch goal, $1,000 a month, is within reach. I've reached over a third of it. We've reached over a third of it. And when that happens, I'm going to add an Ask Me Anything, or Ask Me Almost Anything, an AMAA monthly, where if you have questions, and typically these will be questions about behavior change, because that's my area of expertise, so sort of coaching-ish issues and questions that I'm going to be making available to the world. So if you'd like to help make that happen, and if you like the podcast, and if you appreciate the effort that's gone into it, and you'd like to pay your fair share, and you've got some extra cash lying around that isn't going to hurt you in any way, you can go to patreon.com/plantyourself, or equal opportunity, you can go to plantyourself.com/Patreon. I think that's right. Maybe it's not. But if you go to the homepage of plantyourself.com, on the right sidebar, there's a Patreon link, and you can sign up. And when you do, you also get access to the Healthy Habit Huddles, which I do 3 a month, 45-minute to hour-long talks on healthy habits. And people really tell me they like them, and they're valuable. And so therefore, because human nature is what it is, we all like to get something for something. So if you become a patron, even at $1 a month, you get access to all the upcoming Healthy Habit Huddles and over a year of archived episodes. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about today's guests. But let's keep it brief because they talk about themselves in a much more entertaining way than I will. They are Aaron Stuber and Jackson Long. They are the founders of Thought for Food, which is a burgeoning media empire. Right now, it's a blog, it's an Instagram account, it's a podcast, it's a YouTube channel. But these guys have such energy and such compassion and such wisdom, and they're really funny and they're crude. And, you know, last week I talked to Tara Kemp, and who's another sort of young, up-and-coming representative, teacher, leader, next generation of the plant-based movement. And I think you'll find Aaron and Jackson fit that mold as well. They're friends with Tara. They hang out. They do podcasts together. And it's so great to see this next generation. I don't know. I guess they're millennials, maybe. I'm not really sure about all that stuff. I can't even tell if I'm Gen X or Boomer exactly. But whatever it is, this generation comes unencumbered by a lot of the nutritional baggage that my generation and previous ones have had. And they're really able to talk and engage and share and promote the message in ways that I think are going to be so much more effective than anything we figured out so far. So this conversation is a real joy. It's a pleasure. It's funny. It's crude. It's going to be explicit on iTunes, not clean. So fair warning. And without further ado, Aaron Stuber and Jackson Long of Thought for Food. Welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Pleased to be here.
Yeah, Howard, thanks for having us on, man. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your flexibility. We got some real stuff going on here in Boulder, so we appreciate it.
Cool. Well, you know, I can't touch my toes, so it's one of the few areas in which I can demonstrate flexibility in my schedule. So.
Very, very nice. Very nice.
So I wanted to talk to you guys just because you have such a fun attitude in your publishing world, in your YouTube TV channel, on your podcast, and I just wanted a hit of that energy for me and for my listeners. Yeah. So it occurred to me as I was doing some research that this is going to be one of those explicit episodes, since the first words of the first video I saw on YouTube is, I think, Aaron, you said, "Oh, my hair's all fucked up."
Yes.
So I just want to get that out of the way, that we're not going for clean here.
All right.
All right. Hey, if you think that's fine, we'll we try to. Okay, so this is something we talk about all the time is censorship, and Jackson and I have been known to have some potty humor, but there's sort of like a spectrum there. So like sometimes we're just way overboard with that, and sometimes we really try to clean it up, but we struggle with that because we want to be fun and spontaneous and funny, but we also want to be professional and taken seriously. So that's a hard line to walk,
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do? Do you have like someone's grandma as your litmus test?
Well, we put a shock collar on Aaron usually, and every time he says fuck or shit, it like shocks him with like 100 volts, and just to remind him, it's kind of this like Pavlov's dog sort of experience for him. Yeah. That seems to be working pretty well. Although I think it's just ingrained in his mind. But yeah, I mean, we're both. Off air, we're both a little bit more profane than normal, but I think it's just a process, and I think it's okay to have a little bit of that, authenticity with swearing and in a kind of a tasteful way. I think. Yeah, I think if people are really offended by those words, like, I don't know if Thought for Food TV or podcast is totally right for them.
Yeah, so we sort of just try to balance it and keep it tasteful if we can, when we can, and keep it professional, but also keep it, keep it light, keep the banter fun and sarcastic. And so thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah. So that kind of goes to one of the things that I wanted to talk with you guys about, which is like, what is in the service of your mission? Because I got the sense that a lot of your, quote, potty humor is not just gratuitous. It's you're trying to reach out to an audience. You're trying to establish a vibe. For example, one of the sort of potty humor things you do is this hashtag take epic dumps, which
you did your homework.
Yes,
I do my homework. Yes, which is, and you point out like it's funny, but it's really serious. Like, we are a fiber deficient nation. Can you talk a little bit about, like, who's your audience when you sat down in that coffee shop for the first time to decide, hey, let's do this thing? What was on your mind? Like, what was missing in the marketplace, and who did you want to connect with?
Gosh, there's so many good questions there. Why don't you start with it, Jackson? Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's first talk about the epic dumps. I think the epic dumps sort of came, we first started with this kind of like do epic shit mantra, which to us like encapsulates so much more than just like going and like, doing the Leadville Marathon. Like, that's epic shit, but it's also just kind of being able to take that leap of faith and jump off of a cliff, a metaphorical cliff, in whatever it is that you desire. And for us, that was really starting this podcast. And I think take epic dumps is sort of an extension of that, meaning that you can have these epic bowel movements basically as a result of eating a really high fiber, high plant-based diet. And that is just a really good metric for overall health. And so I think that kind of shows what our sort of audience direction is, and our sort of, mission directive, is we want people that are excited about doing epic stuff, whether that's taking epic dumps or, going on an epic run, and not necessarily everyone that we're trying to reach has to be some extreme athlete or some extreme, dumper, I guess. But, I think when we sat, and it's been an evolution, and when we sat down in that coffee shop, I don't think that we were sort of thinking in this manner. I think we just sort of sat down and were like, hey, we really love podcasts, and we feel that, we could lend our voice in a really kind of unique and fun way. And we had been friends for, maybe a little bit less than a year up until that point, maybe more. And, it kind of instantly when we first met, like our kind of humor and our personalities really clicked with each other. And that sort of, we felt like especially in the plant-based world, there's not necessarily a lot of this sort of not potty humor, but just like entertainment and just not taking ourselves too seriously, but also being able to combine that with the science and the nutrition education to kind of make it a lot easier to digest than just hearing from, a really specialized doctor talking in kind of a dry manner. We wanted to sort of bring that to a little bit of a wider audience, and it sort of evolved into doing it for athletics and for, being adventurous and getting out of your comfort zone and all of these kind of topics that we like to talk about. And we're still learning, like we're still in beta, as I like to say, we're always in beta, and it's always developing and kind of shifting in ways that, we don't ever want to settle, I guess.
Right.
And we don't even really know what we're doing for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, we're learning as we go, but I think to touch on like, who is our audience? Well, I think at first our audience was plant-based people, vegans and vegetarians, right? And then as we progressed, we sort of realized that there's too much echo chamber going on in the plant-based movement right now. And I think if we're going to be committed to science and committed to what is actually true, we need to get out of the vegan echo chamber, and we need to start having these broader conversations and do it in a way that creates sort of a safe place for everybody to come in and absorb these ideas.
Yeah,
right?
Because if our mission is to get more and more people, athletes, and just general people on to eating more plants, it's not really going to help push that forward necessarily if we're just sort of preaching to the choir, I guess.
Right.
So let's make it approachable.
Yeah, let's make it approachable. Like it's great to go around and speak at Veg Fests, but when you go and speak at Veg Fests, you're speaking to vegetarians and vegans for the most part. So what we are trying to do is create these concepts that everybody can get behind, like go eat some plants. Okay. No one can argue that we should all go eat more plants, right? And then the take epic dumps thing is funny, and it's potty humor, and it's sort of sophomorish, but the point of that is to start a conversation, right? So if you had a shirt, we want to make these shirts that say "Eat plants, take epic dumps," right? That seems.
Sign me up.
Yeah,
yes.
we'll send you one. So that seems
finally something I could put on my Instagram for that hashtag, other than the obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't actually take pictures of your poop. We always tell people that's our disclaimer.
The disclaimer, yeah, exactly. So it's a silly thing to say, but if you're walking through the grocery store and you're filling your shopping cart up with plants and you're wearing this shirt and somebody sees that and they're like, oh my gosh, that is so funny. What do you mean by that? And the point is to start a conversation about the importance of eating plants, especially whole plant foods, and eating a high fiber diet. Because as you said earlier, Howard, we are a fiber deficient nation, big time. And the more plants we can eat, the more fiber we can consume, and the healthier our GI system will be, essentially. So, colorectal cancer is a serious problem in the United States, and diverticulitis and diverticulosis, and Crohn's disease,
constipation.
Constipation, ulcerative colitis. These are mostly fiber deficient sort of lifestyle diseases, and so by making this kind of funny catchphrase, you get people to really understand the underlying seriousness of that, and it starts a conversation about what it means to live healthier and to eat more plants.
And so far, a lot of people have been psyched to tag that on Instagram, and they're taking pictures of their meals that are just giant piles of beans and greens and brown rice and these just epic meals. Then we're hoping that can kind of extend out into the mainstream, and people are like, it's like a competition, whoever can eat the most fiber. I mean, obviously you don't want to eat too much fiber. I've made that mistake on bike rides, and that's not a good place to be. But it's like we need to get it. We need to shift the culture to being like really excited about eating as much fiber as possible.
Right. So I want to gnaw on a little bone that you put out there earlier when you said, we don't just want to be in the vegan echo chamber. We want to be committed to science and what is actually true. And I love that. And I'm curious what you mean by that. Like, are there places in which the vegan echo chamber is neglecting science or has, God forbid, some sort of subjective bias?
Yeah. So one of the things that we don't hear a lot in the vegan space, at least in the orthodox space, is that according to the science, there still is room for somewhere around 10% of your calories to be coming from animal products. So we know this when we look at the blue zones populations. Okay, these are the longest living populations on Earth with some of the healthiest people. Those populations, most of them, with the exception of the Seventh-day Adventists, are not vegan or vegetarian. They eat a little bit of animal products, but they're getting about 90% of their calories every day from whole plant foods. And so there's no science yet that tells us that the only way to live the longest and healthiest life possible is to go totally vegan. And so we see that argument neglected a lot in the vegan space and the vegetarian space, and we think that's one of the reasons why vegans are so polarizing, just in the general nutrition community, because most of the time the message you hear is, well, the only true path to health is a totally plant-based diet, and any diversion from that is just going to set you up for cancer and heart disease and diabetes. But according to the best science we have now, the preponderance of evidence, that's not true, although I try to make it clear as well that you can do remarkable things for your health on a totally plant-based diet. It's, a vegetarian diet is the only thing that's been shown to actually clinically reverse coronary artery disease. That's a big deal to me as a cardiovascular nurse. It's been the only thing shown to reverse type 2 diabetes. So from that perspective, like, yes, if you want to do a totally plant-based diet, you're in good company. I mean,
and just for a disclaimer, like Aaron and I we're both fully vegan. Like we are both fully plant-based, and we love that lifestyle. But I think in order to get this to the mainstream, we have to be able to, kind of meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing that I hear, especially at Veg Fests, is the idea that like health is the least important or least interesting reason to do this, and we don't even want to take people there because, that they admit that you can be healthy on that 10%, but we don't want to talk about it because it's all about the animals.
Right. So, and so we don't mean to neglect that part either. The only reason that Jackson and I remain totally plant-based is for ethical and environmental concerns. Should we get to a point, which we will in the relatively near future, where technologies like clean meat becomes a real thing, a viable thing that is on the market. I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with, clean meat like Memphis Meats and companies like that, Silicon Valley startups. If we could get to that point, then I think you'd see a lot more vegans and vegetarians being interested in putting a little bit of animal product back into their diet, somewhere around that 10% line, because suddenly animals are no longer involved and the environmental concerns aren't there. So right now, absolutely, we're vegan because this is an ethical concern for us, an environmental concern. But if we're going to be honest about the science from a health perspective, there is still a little bit of room for animal products there.
Gotcha. So you mentioned Aaron, right? That you're a cardiovascular nurse.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about where you come from and how you arrived at this lifestyle? Were you guys born plant-based athletes, or did you have a journey?
Yeah. So, plant-based stuff sort of came into my life. I don't know, almost 12 years ago. I was a competitive climber at the time, and I met my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and she was a vegetarian. And I thought that was the dumbest thing I had ever heard of. I was like, well, that works for you. You're not an athlete like me. I take this seriously. I need my protein. I need my iron, to recover from these intense training sessions that I'm doing. And then over time, because she wasn't pushy about it, I started having more vegetarian meals. That's just the socially normal thing to do if you're living with somebody. And I liked it. And I felt a little bit better. And I was like, well, all right, let me look into this. I mean, because there have got to be some vegetarian athletes out there. They're probably terrible, but, someone's out there trying, right? So I tried. I started reading. Actually, the first two books I read were the China Study, which you are very well versed in, and then I shouldn't say the China Study; it's multiple studies, but you know that. And then the Food Revolution by John Robbins. And I was surprised to see. Obviously, the China Study is well referenced, but I was surprised to see the Food Revolution being so well referenced scientifically as well. And I thought that was really interesting, and it really piqued my interest. And so after that, I essentially went over the next couple of weeks, I basically transitioned onto a totally vegan diet. And so then I surpassed my wife, and then I kind of told her, like, hey, babe, you got to get the dairy out. Like, that is just, that's ridiculous. So she phased the dairy out. We both became totally plant-based, and I noticed a little bit of athletic improvement. What I was expecting was a real decline potentially in my performance, but I was willing to try it. And what I found was that my performance improved a little bit. Now, it wasn't like some amazing overnight thing where suddenly I could climb 4 grades harder and I never got sore anymore. Another thing that I think people are a little bit tend to be, what is the word I'm looking for? Not as truthful, I think, in the athletic community when it comes to like soreness. So you hear things a lot like, well, I went vegan and then I never got sore again. And, I ran a marathon an hour faster than I normally do. And I think you will see some modest increases in performance, especially when it comes to recovery, but it wasn't some like incredible transformational thing for me. But
especially at that upper end of athletics.
So you've already been a competitive athlete for some time and you're well trained and your body is very well tuned to the sport you're doing at. It's an edge for sure. If
right.
you do,
and before
Yeah.
Before you went vegan, I'm assuming you weren't climbing on a diet of ring dings and Twinkies and Krispy Kremes.
Not that, but it wasn't. I mean, I wasn't eating that well. I mean, I was probably drinking. I was drinking a lot of milk, and I wasn't eating a ton of meat. So the dairy part, I think, was honestly the biggest change for me. And certainly, I lost a little bit of weight. I kind of toned up a little bit, and I recovered a little bit better. And I was like, "Hey, this is great. This is an edge. I feel good. Let's just keep going with that." And so, I've been on various, types of plant-based diets over the last 12 years, and I'd say the last 5 years have been totally vegan. And I've really enjoyed that, even as a competitive ultra marathon runner and doing some other things. So that's sort of my trajectory. Of course, I went to nursing school as well and became a nurse, and we can talk about that as well. But Jackson, why don't you tell a little your story?
Yeah, so I started road cycling when I was 12 years old and quickly kind of fell in love with the sport of cycling and started racing at, kind of the national level. And I did some international races, kind of in my later years as a junior. And then I came to college here in Boulder at the University of Colorado, CU Boulder, and got on a really high level team. So I was racing at the category 1 level, which is the highest amateur level you can reach before you go pro, essentially. And I was the young guy on this team, and it was a really fully funded, fully sponsored team. And I took the semester off from school, the spring semester off, and went and lived down in Tucson, Arizona for the winter to train, because obviously in the mountains of Colorado it snows in the winter and it's hard to ride your bike doing that. So I was kind of preparing for the upcoming season. I was the young guy on the team, and a lot of pressure, both kind of externally and internally, to perform that season. I was super psyched. I was like, this is my chance to, turn pro and get a pro contract. And so I went fully monk mode basically, and kind of got super serious, super obsessed. I have a very obsessive personality. And so I kind of took everything to the nth degree and was obsessed with losing weight, restricting calories, counting calories to get as light and as lean as possible, and was sort of actually eating. I grew up eating a pretty healthy diet in the grand scheme of things. My mom was a great cook, but I sort of didn't really know much about nutrition. I was studying physiology in school, but the nutrition classes that I was taking weren't really that well designed, in my opinion, and a lot of this stuff was more reductionist, science. How many milligrams of vitamin D do you, or vitamin C or whatever, all these specific kinds of information. I didn't really know that much about what nutrition or what a healthy kind of diet, especially for athletes, looked like. And I sort of fell into the paleo diet and was sort of following that. And so I was eating just a ton of meat, like very little carbohydrates, really basically afraid of carbohydrates. And I got down to about 130 pounds at my lightest, and, which is like 25, 30 pounds lighter than I am now, which is crazy to think about. And just, in a bad spot. Like I was training super hard, 20, 30 hours a week, and, putting all this time in training, and sort of started to just really feel terrible, just fatigued all the time and not performing well, and kind of struggling through this time. And we had a training camp, and my team director kind of like called me out and was like, dude, you're really skinny, and we need to kind of talk about this. And so I ended up getting walking pneumonia as well. And it basically like ruined my whole season, this kind of pivotal season for me, my sophomore year of college. And
now, did you at that point, did you have like coaches or mentors, who like other people who were doing paleo? Like, were they saying do paleo but just eat extra bacon to put on some pounds, or were they sort of indicting the whole paleo pattern?
Yeah. So I had a coach and a team director, like a team, director, manager. And so my coach was definitely directing a lot, obviously my training, but he was also talking to me a lot about diet. And he was the one that kind of turned me on to the paleo diet. And I still like his kind of philosophy with it was much more whole food based paleo rather than bacon and eggs kind of paleo and like coconut oil in your coffee sort of thing. But I sort of like learned from him, but also just kind of took it to the extreme in my own way. And so I actually read the Paleo Diet for Athletes book. There's an actual book that's called Paleo Diet for Athletes, which is like funny thinking back now. But and so he was sort of out of the picture again, because he was in Colorado, I was in Arizona, and like he was just looking at my training. I'd upload my training files up on the internet, and he would analyze them, and he would tell me what to do. And it's not like I was just absolutely like shitting the bed when it came to the training. I mean, I was actually training really well, and I was kind of feeling well, because I think it hadn't quite caught up to me yet. And this was in February-ish probably, and racing didn't start until March. So it really hit me after kind of at the end of this trip to Arizona. That's when I got walking pneumonia, and I started to like basically DNF every race. We do the national racing calendar is the big kind of pro amateur racing series, and it was my first year really kind of having a go at that, and I just got crushed, and it was a bummer.
When you were getting crushed, did it just feel like physical fatigue, or was there like mental fog too around strategy? Around like I was just watching this clip from like the 2003 Tour de France where Lance Armstrong is in front of someone who falls, and like Lance does this amazing like gets out of his way, rides across the grass.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking, he was a like smart dude. Like were you like less smart in your races, or was it just physical?
It was definitely mainly physical. I mean, obviously I was very young, and this was my first real attempt at this level of racing. So I was still very green when it came to the actual strategy. And I was on a really good team, and we were really well dialed in terms of strategy and stuff. But it was mainly physical. I mean, there definitely was a lot of times where you make a strategic or tactical mistake, and it you lose time or whatever. But once I sort of got everything figured out with nutrition and stuff, I sort of kind of came back and was a lot better. And so how the plant-based thing came into play for me was once I kind of realized that there was something wrong with the way I was eating. I sort of was like, okay, I'm going to do a full 180 and kind of totally wipe the slate clean and figure out exactly, take a lot more seriously the nutrition and not really, and try and erase a lot of those preconceived notions of, carbs are bad and you need to restrict and restrict and restrict, because it's actually a really unfortunate kind of culture within cycling and in, other endurance sports, but I can only speak to cycling, is that there's sort of this like hidden culture of disordered eating in cycling, especially at high levels, because you have to really get to certain weights to be a fast climber, and so a lot of the people and teammates and stuff I was with were kind of doing the same thing. So it just kind of became this normal way of living, of really eating in this specific restrictive way, and it kind of blinds you. But anyway, I started to kind of research the plant-based things. I'd heard about it. I'd watched Forks Over Knives just kind of randomly on Netflix, and I was like, okay, this makes sense from a health perspective, like a longevity kind of perspective. But yeah, what about athletes? And I mean, I know that they did highlight some athletes in there, and so I was like, okay, well, it looks like it's possible. And so I kind of started to learn about Rich Roll and Brendan Brazier and some of these high level athletes, and I sort of just on a whim decided to just basically overnight go completely vegan, and I just immediately started sleeping better and had much better, I'd say less than the kind of performance thing. I mean, it's hard to extrapolate out, but basically, gaining that weight back that I'd lost, combined with actually eating enough carbohydrates to fuel my training and racing, I immediately obviously started feeling a lot better. But I don't know if that's necessarily due to the plant-based diet or just getting enough to eat, basically. But yeah, I mean, I definitely started to recover better, and it took many months to kind of get back to where I was feeling normal again. But yeah, and ever since then, it's just become like a passion of mine. I just really felt like it clicked for me and works for me, and started to do a ton of research. I read every single book I possibly could on the subject, and really did my research. And combining this with my education in physiology, it was a really kind of no-brainer for me, I guess.
Now, so when you said you went vegan overnight on a whim, like,
I guess it wasn't really a whim, like.
Well, but I mean, it sounds like you did it without the kind of struggle that a lot of the people I work with have, where they watch Forks Over Knives and they spend the next 5 years trying to do it. Like, did you ever have a point, like, maybe you say like you're monk-like obsessive, like you're able to do it for the training season, but then was there ever a point where you said, well, what if I can never have X again, a cheeseburger, a milkshake, whatever? Like, did you ever have a behavioral issue, or was it just sort of snap your fingers and make the change?
Well, the biggest behavioral issue for me was socially, because I was still I was still on the same team, and I was still traveling around the country with my team to race. And so I was a closet vegan for probably like 2 months, maybe. Didn't tell anyone. And like, I wasn't perfect. I wasn't like, never eaten a piece of meat. Like I remember, like, I think I went, quote unquote vegan in like May or something, end of May. And then like it was 4th of July, and I was at a race with my team, and we had this big barbecue, and like the only thing that was there really was like cheeseburgers. And so I had a cheeseburger, and like I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna like force this. I'm gonna pretend like I'm just normal still. And but like that didn't just like launch me back into where I was eating. So
it sounds like it wasn't an identity issue. It was simply like, this is instrumental in my training.
I mean, I think it wasn't I think it was an identity issue for me, because I was still a little bit insecure with it, early on, because I didn't know that much about it, and I was constantly worried about my teammates finding out and like asking me all these questions, and they're like, "Oh, great. Jackson kind of went from this, crazy restrictive way of eating now to like this other sort of restrictive way of eating." And so I really wanted to make sure I like knew my shit before I kind of came out of the closet in a lot of ways. And so for me, like the social thing was really hard, because I was traveling and training, and I didn't know anyone that was vegan really, and especially in the cycling world. And I think that's how Aaron and I basically met. Was I went to a vegan meetup dinner thing here in Boulder, and because I was hoping to find some other people to talk to about athletics, and because I was still like, oh, what about iron and protein and soy and all these things, and I asked them like, hey, do you guys have any recommendations for vegan athletes in Boulder that I could talk to? And they're like, Aaron Stuber. And so we met for coffee, and I asked him every question I possibly could think of, because my coach wasn't super supportive of it at the time, and he was really worried about the deficiencies or the low iron and all these things. And also I was low iron even when I was not plant-based. And I think that was just from a lack of calories and just the high training load that I was doing. And so I just wanted to make sure I kind of had my ducks in a row with it.
So what was it like to come out of the closet as a vegan? So your coach was concerned about your performance. Were there any other issues, social identity? Did people feel threatened, make fun of you? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially in my cycling kind of bubble, a lot of people were just not threatened, but they just sort of felt like it was gimmicky, or like a phase, and they just thought it was super weird. And so of course, every time we would eat a meal, they would make a big deal out of it. And it just, I did get pretty tired of that. And I still do get pretty tired of that. And so I try to avoid situations like that. But yeah, I think a lot of it was in my head too. I think a lot of it, it was just so new, and now all those same people are super supportive of it, and a lot of them have actually started to eat more plant-based as a result. And so I think it's just that initial kind of change. I think humans, in a lot of ways, a lot of humans are really resistant to change, and so they see that and they think that it's some sort of weird thing. And I think that's also potentially a big reason why Aaron and I take the position that we do with this stuff, is that vegan is almost a very loaded term in today's world, and for better or for worse. And I think it really kind of showed me that hey, if you just lead by example, do your own thing, be comfortable with it, and not make a big deal out of it, and just kind of live your life, it makes it so much better for both parties. But so, I think I quickly figured out the nutrition side of it, and was eating really well, and I've sort of evolved in many different ways with my diet. But I think I was just, because I have an obsessive personality, I did so much research and a lot of self-experimentation with the diet, and really kind of dialed it in for me as an athlete.
Right. So, Aaron, I'm curious whether you had the same experience of it was pretty easy to switch once you decided you wanted to, or, were you subject to kind of the cravings and doubts and backsliding that is, pretty common?
Yeah, so it's extraordinarily common. Most of the people that we talk to, that we work with as well, they really struggle to transition from a standard American diet to a mostly or totally plant-based diet. Jackson and I are anomalies in the sense that both of us are the type of people who can, if you present sufficient evidence, the next day we are making that change, and we never look back, which makes us potentially less appealing, I think, to people who are really struggling with it. But I'd like to think that we're really patient and understanding with people who are struggling. I have professional training as a health coach, so I understand the behavioral issues around some of that stuff. But I had my doubts for sure. I was really heavy on supplementation. I think when I first started, so protein supplements and a number of other things. I still do take some evidence-based supplements, but I was still concerned with some of the macronutrient ideas and things like that. And of course, as time goes by, I think people become less and less concerned, especially about protein. So I had some doubts around that. but in terms of like behavioral transition to actually get on the diet, no, I'm not a picky eater in any way. I mean, I could eat a plate of beans 3 meals a day, and I'd probably be fine with that. So that was that's really helpful, I think, for anybody who's trying to make that transition. But no, not terribly difficult for me.
So I'm really curious because you describe yourselves as sort of anomalies. If you just get sufficient evidence, you'll change. And I'm wondering why that is anomalous.
Right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
It really hasn't occurred to me because the people I've been working with and my own experience has been like a slog, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, cravings and doubts and social pressure and stupid Facebook feeds and lies by the dairy industry, et cetera, et cetera. And it's so complicated. And I'm wondering if you think it's because you guys were athletes. And especially like high-level performance athletes, I think in order to get there, you have to kind of have a bias toward reality, like what actually works for you, and you're very sensitive to it, as opposed to the rest of us who are sort of muddling along, and we can do something, and it's a stupid thing to do, but we don't ever notice because there's a time lag between when we do it and when it comes back to bite us in the ass. Yeah. I'm wondering, what like unusually you came to these diets as high-level performance athletes. And I'm wondering if you think that had something to do with your pragmatism.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think people who dedicate the majority of their time to athletic endeavors and are always on that path of increased performance, like what tiny little tweaks can I make to get an edge in my performance? I think it's much more likely that should they find something they perceive to be another addition to their routine that would give them an edge, it's very easy to just make that sacrifice, if you will. And then I think the average person, they really see a transition to plant-based as sort of a decline almost, I think, in like the fun of life. And I think that's a big obstacle for a lot of people. So even though you can eat so much food, I think they still see it as sort of restrictive in some way, or extreme, and sort of less fun than their life was before. And, you always hear that argument like, well, if I lived 10 years less, at least I had a ton of fun while I was here. And it's like, of course, they don't take into account how awful chronic disease is. But yeah, I do. I think athletes are well suited to make big lifestyle changes because they're already used to sort of being in that pain cave and making changes and coming out on the other side a better person.
And I think also something that we talk a lot about is sort of listening to your body. And I think athletes naturally have this really strong sense of being able to really get in touch and in tune with the sensations of the body, and because when you're training and you're trying new training protocols, or you're doing different interval sets or something, and you get immediate feedback, whether that's going to help you perform in the next time trial or help you gain more muscle or whatever it is you're trying to do, you get that instantaneous feedback almost, and I think that really helps to teach you what to think critically about things that are helping you with your health or your performance or your lifestyle. And I think diet plays into that hugely. I think it's really easy to for maybe a normal person to just disregard diet as this important piece of your lifestyle and like, oh, I just enjoy hamburgers so much, I'm just going to keep doing it, like that improves my quality of life. But I think that it's harder for people to really understand how that makes you feel. And so once you try the plant-based diet, maybe it's a little bit harder to get over that hump, I guess. But I think I like what you said about all this muck that we have to kind of walk through in order to understand what is true about nutrition or even exercise. And, with our Facebook feeds just clogged with sensational headlines about different nutrition dogma and stuff. And I think it's just, that's what we're trying to do, is like make this make this easy and approachable and fun, and not focus too much on like these really intense arguments and discourses and philosophies around diet. It's like, let's just eat more plants and then like allow that to fuel us to go and do whatever the hell we want with our lives.
Well, and I'm curious about how you guys sort of coach and help people. But one of the things that I've shifted a great deal in the past year or so is as I've become an athlete and I've become a runner, and like with a Garmin GPS watch, so I can really like pay attention to my metrics. It's like I just want to tell everybody, just go get a sport and really devote yourself to improvement, and then the diet just becomes an instrumental.
Yes,
it's like it's not the main thing that we talk about anymore. Like we it's not all like when I started with this podcast. I was really like, I look back at my archives, it was like mostly cookbook authors and all the latest, vegan chocolate and this and that. And I realized like I was just promoting shits and giggles.
Yeah.
As opposed to like now, like you said, like beans 3 times a day is fine because it's not important.
Right.
Like it is, but it's not the main thing. It's my performance.
Yeah,
is the main thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Shifting over to a new dietary protocol, it becomes secondary when the biggest motivation for you is becoming an athlete. And I understand that not everybody wants to be an athlete. Many people just hate exercise, which is another big obstacle. But it's true, if you decide I want to become a runner and I'm going to run my first marathon, or I'm going to become a traveler and I'm going to have epic adventures around the world, then food becomes the fuel to do that really well. And that's essential. And that's a big part of our philosophy at TFF.
Yeah, because we see a lot in the vegan community, especially this sort of obsession with the food, and posting photos of their, perfectly designed, smoothie bowls with like, cool designs with the chia seeds and a swirl
and lighting and
yeah.
a professional camera,
Yeah, and like I that stuff is great if you're really into photography like that, and like I mean definitely that stuff sort of was helpful for me when I was first learning how to eat this way, because it's like, oh, okay, this is what people have for lunch,
like that looks really good.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And I don't have anything against that, but what I am against is this unhealthy obsession with food where it kind of dictates, like it becomes your life and it becomes like everything you talk about, everything you post about, and you really, your identity is with the food and you kind of forget to live your life. And a lot of vegans, I feel like, tend to kind of get comfortable in their own bubble because they can control all these aspects of food, and then they get afraid to go out and travel to some foreign country, and they're like, oh, but there's something, the food is going to be out of my control. Like, what am I going to do? I can't have my like chia seed like pudding, like, what am I going to do?
What about my fermented nut cheese?
Yeah. Like I can't do this. And so like, I think it's important to be able to step out of that. And don't get me wrong, I fucking love a great smoothie bowl with granola and like my, special mushroom coffees and stuff. And like, I do. But I also realize that there's a time and a place for that. And like, for example, I'm going to Europe on Saturday, and I'm not thinking about food. Like the main purpose of that trip is to adventure in the Alps with my bike. And like, so I think what we're trying to do is create a culture of people that love eating plants, and as a result, taking epic dumps. Just going to keep hitting that home here. but doing it in a way that is efficient and exciting and fun and
practical.
Like slamming a couple sweet potatoes so that you can go like out into the mountains for the day or something, but it's hard because there is that balance there, and we do have to give people the tools. Not everyone likes to have a sweet potato with just a can of black beans poured on it for dinner, like I do 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm becoming less and less charitable about that. Like, you mentioned, like, not everyone wants to become an athlete. Many people hate exercise. like I have less and less patience for that because
Yeah.
it's like my bird doesn't like flying. My fish doesn't really want to swim. It's like we are athletes.
And it comes back to,
that's a great point.
Well, and it also comes back to movement over like workouts.
Right.
Like let's stop obsessing about like, oh, I have to get my workout in for the day. It's like, no, just go play outside. Go move. Don't just like go sit on the elliptical because you like want to burn X amount of calories for the day. Find something that you enjoy that is outside, that connects you with nature, that is social, that makes you feel really good, and then you start to forget that you get those added benefits of exercise. And like that's just, I think, an important point that maybe that's why people hate exercise. I think we're naturally designed to be outdoor mobile creatures. We're hugely biologically, physiologically suited for that kind of movement, and I think maybe a lot of reasons why, and this gets into whole like sociological and philosophical debates, but with the media and with our culture, kind of being obsessed with body image and working out to burn a certain amount of calories and going to the gym and doing your crunches and your stairmasters and things like that. It's like, I hate that shit. I will I will go into a gym dragging my heels because it doesn't give me that same level of just like excitement and adventure that I do from, hiking a mountain or riding my bike through the forest. I think that's so much more important. Even just that small shift in mental approach and relationship to exercise or, movement or whatever, like that's the key, I think.
Yeah, and it's funny, like we have these different programs within ourselves. Like the body wants to move, and it wants to move to the point of like painful exertion. Like, and the mind is going, "Oh, this sucks. Like the mind just wants to conserve our energy, right, in case the food runs out and we get chased by a saber-toothed tiger. But our bodies, like once we just start moving, and it's I agree, like playing and just being free and expressive and being outdoors and in nature, and Boulder certainly helps.
Yeah, of course.
But also there's the imperative to like empty our capacity. Like I talk about this a lot with my business partner Josh Lajani, who used to weigh 420 pounds and is now an ultra runner. Like the importance of on a regular basis pushing through to discomfort and not just sort of skipping through meadows.
Absolutely.
The magic happens on that when you cross over that line from comfort to discomfort.
Yeah, and this is another huge part of what we talk about on a regular basis is the importance of getting out of your comfort zone all the time. So that's why in the winter I go and I sit outside in the snow and meditate. It's why I love hyperthermic conditioning. So I sit in saunas for a lot. It's why I love running ultra marathons in the mountains. It's why I love lifting weights. It's why Jackson loves to ride for 6 hours on his bike in the mountains. I mean, it's why we started the podcast. It's why we basically do everything that we do at Thought for Food, because the lifestyle is about constantly pushing that comfort zone. And you don't want to be in panic mode and you don't want to be comfortable. It's that line, it's that yellow space between green and red, basically, that you want.
That's where you grow.
That's where you grow. And so we really encourage people, like, look, I don't care what your sport is. I don't care whether you're totally vegan or not. Like, you've got to eat mostly plants, please. Like, just start with that. You've got to move your body in a way that inspires you, and you've got to challenge yourself all the time. Challenge yourself physically, challenge yourself mentally. That is where the sweet spot in life is. And I think we live in a society that reinforces the absolute opposite of all of those things. So not enough plants. Don't ever be sedentary all the time. And then we have these systems that hijack our circadian rhythm. So, we're in boxes all day with lights. Our body has no idea how to deal with that, right? We have all these clocks and these sensors that try to tell us whether it's daytime or nighttime. We're surrounded by light all the time. We are in air conditioned, heat controlled units all the time, right? So we never have to deal with heat stress or cold stress. Like, we're weak. Our bodies are soft and weak, and our minds are weak because of that. And so no wonder it's so hard for people to make big lifestyle shifts that are uncomfortable, because that, like you said earlier, it's like that brain wants it to stay that way. It wants the maximum amount of calories with the lowest amount of exertion and the most amount of predictability and ease in your day. Like all good mammals, avoid pain and seek pleasure. That's what we're hardwired to do. And so it's really tough to get out of that bubble. But once you do, I find that once people usually assimilate to that new sort of lifestyle, they never go back, because I just couldn't imagine living any other way.
Yeah. And one of the phrases that has made the biggest difference to me and in my coaching over the past year is benign masochism. The idea,
nice.
and you guys definitely, embody it, right? It's like, it's not like I'm doing this pain now for benefit later, which is just a really shitty algorithm.
Yeah.
And it's what we're supposed to do. Like, how many units of pain to go to the gym so that I can look good in a bathing suit in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it.
But to learn to teach ourselves to derive pleasure from the pain we're feeling in the moment. Like,
oh yeah.
Like alchemically converted into self-esteem and pride.
Yeah.
It's maybe making my palms sweaty here.
Yeah, my palms, my both of us have sweaty palms right now just talking about this, because it's physiological. Like, it becomes a part of your being to imagine a little bit of suffering, and to imagine that pain and what you learn from embracing that pain and getting through it to the other side.
When it gets into, hormesis and this eustress versus de-stress, I think that the chronic stress of eating a shitty diet and being sedentary and being exposed to all these environmental toxins, that's de-stress. But eustress is this good kind of stress, which is like exercise, which is, hyperthermic conditioning and intermittent fasting and all these things that creates this kind of physiological reaction in the body that actually like upregulates the body's ability to, fight off, infections or just adapt to and grow and become stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger is quite literally true, basically, to a certain extent. But that growth is what I'm addicted to. Like I so much has happened to me in the last year or two, basically since starting this podcast and just this platform. And it's like, it's so goofy what we do, but like it has quite literally changed my life in such profound ways, where this do epic shit and, get out of your comfort zone, all these kinds of, take epic dumps even, like I think about them all day, every day. And I make decisions based on, okay, like, what is this? Is this decision I'm going to make comfortable or uncomfortable, and like, why? And what are kind of taking a account of like what the possible pros and cons are. And I think that can be said for diet too. Like, what's the worst that could happen by adopting a plant-based diet? Like, the worst that could happen is like, oh, maybe socially it's awkward or hard. And like, but like, who gives a shit, to a certain extent. Like, this is your life. You have to be able to, make the decisions. But I guess I don't even really know where I'm going with this little rant, but like, I want people to understand that the most amazing things happen to you when you make that leap of faith into the discomfort zone. And like, it gives me chills to think about the trajectory that my life has taken since really even graduating from college, in ways that I never would have imagined. And I don't know what's next, after a month from now is like as far ahead as my life is planned, but I don't care, because that's exciting to me. And that's what drives me and makes me like wake up in the morning every day and just so excited to kind of get it done.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Do you guys find that attitude around, getting out of your comfort zone physically, getting out of your comfort zone around food, does that also bleed into like emotional life, like having conversations with people that were going to require courage, being more sort of, holding your boundaries or where whatever your particular sort of edges are in sort of interpersonal and internal growth? Do you find that there's a carryover?
Huge.
Yeah,
Big time.
absolutely. I think when you just make yourself a person that's always confronting fear and always seeking that slight level of discomfort, there's no way for it not to bleed into everything else. I mean, if you get used to making yourself, I suppose there could be a situation where physically you make yourself uncomfortable a lot, and that's kind of like your happy space or your safe place, but like emotionally you're just not willing to deal with certain issues or have certain conversations with people. I suppose you could compartmentalize the effort, but I found personally that it bleeds into all things.
Yeah, I found my conversations with people to be much more rich and
especially with the podcast.
Yeah,
right?
and I think it's hard to like determine which is which or what kind of came first, but and I'm sure you've probably felt this as well, Howard, is doing the podcast every week has just transformed the way that I talk to people, the way that I listen to people, and just the way that I talk in general. Like I feel like, I mean, if you go back and listen to some of our early episodes, they're pretty embarrassing, like how kind of monotone I am and how awkward I am. And I used to be a very kind of like just pretty awkward dude. And I still am I call myself the king of the goons.
You're a major goon, dude.
But I have found that like I am just drawn to, and people are like come into my life, people that are just kind of on a very similar wavelength, and I really appreciate that. And I really, I'm not a religious person, I'm not a very spiritual person, but one of the biggest things that has happened as a result of this whole process is like it's crazy kind of how things line up in your life when you're kind of following a passion, whether it's a passion or just an interest, even how those things line up when you're sort of just going for it and being okay with that unknown territory that you're kind of walking into, and it's a really cool experience.
So kind of coming back full circle to your audience, your market, are you finding that you are attracting and having conversations with people who already come from this like kind of gung-ho, we're going to seek our fear and obliterate it? Or are you bringing people in, who are sort of tepid about that or curious and kind of helping them to take baby steps towards their own epic?
I think we have a little bit of both.
A little bit, yeah. I'd say a little bit of everything. We definitely attract a lot of athletes, and those people of course are cyclists and runners and climbers and people who are used to being in that state of discomfort. But we also attract a lot of science-minded people, so people who are in school for different scientific disciplines and people who work in the scientific field, just because of our emphasis on evidence and why that's so important. And so I'd say it's a large spectrum from really shy and sort of just slightly interested in maybe trying a kind of plant-based lifestyle, not quite so sure, just looking over the fence a little bit at us, to people who are just 100% full-blown dedicated, like, you guys are amazing, and tell me about intermittent fasting and how can I optimize my health. So we get the real spectrum from the very general to the very specific.
So how do you guys coach people who are at the sort of more tepid end, the more hesitant, curious end of the spectrum? Because once someone's caught the bug, once they've got that passion and purpose, then it gets really easy to help them, right? You just give them a training plan. You just tweak it every so often. It's sort of the classroom management part where half of them is unmotivated and maybe even pulling in the other direction. What do you guys do to help those people along?
Yeah, so we're still building up our coaching and consulting platform and putting it together. But as we're doing that, we're working with different people, and so as an entity, we still don't have a ton of experience with that. But I did some health and nutrition coaching before Thought for Food, and I think the biggest thing with folks who are in that position where they're just not quite sure and they very much want to take small steps and just they want you to hold their hand is you just have to do those things, right? And I think one of the most important things you can do is give people goals that they can set that are easily attainable, right? So you build someone's self-efficacy as opposed to their self-esteem by giving them little milestones that you know they can reach, and every time they reach a milestone they get a little victory, and then they get another victory, and then they get another victory, and that starts to build their sense that I can set goals and I can achieve those things. And before you know it, you're halfway to your sort of 1 year or your 5-year goals, or your larger sort of we do like a perfect day exercise where someone imagines like what the perfect lifestyle for them would look like. And so you try to help them walk towards that. And so when you give them those little tiny victories, their self-efficacy goes up. And before they know it, they're, halfway or 3/4 to the way towards their sort of their new ideal life. So I think for that patient population, as I will call it, just because I'm a nurse, that setting those small attainable goals is the very first thing you should do, and not try to cram this huge bolus of stuff down their throat. Just give them the little bits and hold their hand and make them feel good about it, and they'll get the rest of the way there most of the time. Sometimes that doesn't work either, and those are difficult clients to work with. So
I love that. That's it makes so much sense, and it's so easy to give people little things that they can succeed at because it feels good for us too, right? Not just.
Oh yeah. I mean, it goes both ways. Like as a coach, you feel great when you successfully coach somebody to a victory, no matter how small that is. So that could be something as simple as, can you eat one piece of broccoli a week? Like that could I have literally started with one green thing on your plate a week. And you find that 99.99% of people can do that. And so they're like, hey, I had a big thing of broccoli this week. Awesome. Man, doesn't it feel good to get some greens, And then you just bump it up a little bit and bump it up a little bit. And then you deal with the movement part too. Like, hey, when you get home from work, instead of right away sitting down on the couch, opening a beer and watching Law and Order, let's walk for 5 minutes. So just walk, go out in your neighborhood, walk for 5 minutes, and then do exactly what you would normally do. And then just start building that up. And you both get these warm, fuzzy feelings and this dopamine hit basically every time that happens. And it's like the therapeutic relationship increases for the better. And then of course their life increases. And a year later, they're just kicking ass at life, And
I think it also comes back to sort of just our general approach for everything that we do, where it comes back to, meeting people where they are, and not like we could just as easily just be sort of these really, black and white sort of vegans that are really like, okay, like we're abolitionists, vegan is the only way, for, the planet, for the animals and for our health. And like, if someone comes to us and they're like, hey, I'm eating meat, a few times a week, but I'm kind of interested in plants, like what should I do? We could just say, well, you just got to go vegan. Like, it's just like this is why. Here are the studies. Like, the vegan is the best, blah, blah, blah.
Haven't you seen Cowspiracy?
Yeah. Like, I think it's just important to understand your audience and really be able to read and listen to whoever it is that's coming to you when it comes to food and exercise, and being flexible and patient with people and just leading by example. And I think that's why I like to share, the lifestyle that I live on the YouTube channel, or when Aaron and I talk about stuff like that on the podcast. Like, we want to help inspire people to understand that you can reach the goals that you want to do or want to achieve, and it doesn't have to be overnight like the way we did it, I guess.
Beautiful. So there's so much more I would love to talk to you guys about, but I'm looking at the time, and I think many of my listeners are like sitting in the parking lot of their commute, being late for work. But how can folks get in touch with you? How can they follow you and get some vitamin Aaron and vitamin Jackson into their lives?
I love that.
That's great. I'll leave that to Jackson because he does this more often than I do.
Vitamin J and vitamin A, your daily dose. Yeah, so you can definitely check out our podcast. That's kind of our bread and vegan butter. It's the Thought for Food podcast. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, all the places. And then probably our next best thing is YouTube, Thought for Food TV on YouTube. Just go search in YouTube, Thought for Food TV. That's kind of like what I do mainly. Aaron's not a huge part of that. He sometimes makes appearances, whether it's putting makeup on me. He did a famous makeup tutorial. I don't know if you've seen that one, but
definitely check that out if you haven't.
But I mainly do like video blogs, so like vlogs, and I'm actually about to embark on this pretty epic trip to Europe to raise money for Mercy for Animals. Actually, with a couple friends, we're going to be riding our bikes up the most epic and historic climbs in the French and Italian Alps, and I'm going to be vlogging the whole time and kind of documenting that process of how we thrive as plant-based athletes and doing epic shit basically. And so I'll be putting up a lot of videos on there. You can follow us on Instagram at TFF Lifestyle. It's just TFF Lifestyle. We're on Facebook and Twitter, and but you can find us. And our website, of course, is just tfflifestyle.com.
Awesome. Well, my brothers who from other sports, I feel like there's so much that I have learned in the past couple of years that I'm guessing. I don't know exactly how old you guys are, but I'm guessing from your photos that you're either like extremely healthy or in your like late 20s, early 30s.
So I'm 33 on the 22nd of this month, and Jackson is 23. So I'm a decade older than him.
Gotcha. And God, I wish I had learned this stuff.
Oh, I'm so grateful every single day. Decades. So grateful.
Yeah, I'm grateful too that I'm not 80 saying, "Boy, I wish I'd learned this when I was 50." But,
right.
I think it's so awesome that you guys are inspiring a generation. I'm sure you're inspiring people of all ages, but especially speaking to generations who can use this information to benefit themselves and the planet and the animals for decades to come into healthy lives. So Aaron and Jackson, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been really fun having this conversation.
Yeah, it's been awesome, Howard. Thank you for having us on. And I feel like we could talk probably for another 3 or 4 hours about this stuff. So maybe we can repeat this at another time. We'd love to get you on our show and continue the conversation. Awesome. I'd love to. I've got that on tape now, so I'm going to hold you to it. All right, good. Good. Yeah, well, we really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. You asked some really great questions, and it was an honor to kind of sit down and hash these things out. And like we've said this is an ongoing process. We never arrive. We have to continue to have conversations with people like you, people like us, and beyond, and be able to really build and create community even outside of the podcast realm. Like let's I would love to meet you in person and go for a run. I wish I could come up to Leadville this weekend and cheer you on, but I'll be on a plane. So yeah, let's make it happen, and best of luck to you this weekend and just with everything else you have going on. We really appreciate it. Right on. Thanks so much. See ya. If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Those reviews really help us out when we're trying to reach more listeners and spread the word. For more information about the Big Change program led by me and Josh Lajani, visit bigchangeprogram.com, and be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to everything we talked about at plantyourself.com/223. If you're new to the show, catch up. 225 archived episodes at plantyourself.com. And if you get the podcast, but not the Big Change Bulldog, the weekly-ish newsletter, you can sign up and also get that Stop Self-Sabotage report at plantyourself.com/sabotage. So I'm about to read the list of sponsors, but I've gotten some feedback from folks that the list is getting too long and it's starting to get annoying. So I have to think about that. If you have a thought about whether
You find this long list of podcast patrons to whom I am so grateful to be annoying. If you have another idea about how to honor them, maybe rotation or something like that, let me know. You can just leave a comment at the podcast below the episode that you're listening to. But until then, until I figure out what to do, here we go. Thanks to Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Mara, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennedy, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Dielson, Tina Sharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bisek, and Mysterious Michelle X, Elspeth Heldman, Victoria Dolmanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrew, Josina, Julianne, Roland, Stu Dolik, Sarah Durkis, Ryan Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzak, Jeanette Benham, Gila, Sarah, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Doreen, Doron Avizov, rhymed with Keep the Cheese Off, sorry Doron, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Thunderberg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Halmis, Mark the Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R, Susan Lafferty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Burry, rhymes with Furry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabine Kurtzals, Nigel Davies, and Marion Blum, which rhymes with plum. Thank you so much for your generous support of the podcast. Thanks also to Will Ridenauer. His song Sabali Dun, The Dance of Peace, is the intro and outro music for this show, and you can find his music at willridenauer.com. If you would like to support the show, you can share this and other episodes on your favorite social media platform. You can write that iTunes review. And, of course, you can become a Patreon of the show with a ongoing contribution, ideally. And you can do that over at plantyourself.com. Just click the Patreon link in the sidebar. In garden news, we pulled out most of the basil, replaced it with baby kale in the form of seeds, hoping that that's going to keep us in greens throughout the fall, winter, and spring. We've also made a great baba ganoush out of the eggplants that are coming in fast and furious, and the tomatoes are pretty much done, and that's about all we got in the garden going on. In running news, still running nice and slow, easy, 6 fun miles today. I'm starting to look at the calendar. October 14th is my 50K, and I'm hoping to beat last year's time. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.